We are live. Hello, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever time of day you're watching us. And if for those who are watching us on repeat, please hashtag repeat below. And remember, we need all the love that you can share with us. And remember to share us because maybe there's something we're talking about that can help somebody else. Hello, Nicole. How are you, my darling?
I'm good. It's midweek already. It's just crazy. And we're pushing towards the end of February. How crazy is that?
I know it's been quite a fun, incredible month for me. I have had a couple of trips in between. I have had COVID and I have caught my breath and I'm back to reality of life and I'm doing good. And I was excited to, when I touched base with our wonderful gentleman who we're going to be talking about shortly, that I got news. And let's tell our news to people. Go for it.
Well, it's very exciting because we have rescheduled the David Meltzer interview. Is it March 15th, I believe, which is what, 3 weeks away?
Right.
And he gave us a half hour of his time, which we are going to utilize wisely. Because if Glenda told me to read a book that he wrote, and it's called Connected Goodness. And I'm not a business person. I just don't think that way. And I thought to myself, okay, well, I'll read it because he's going to be coming on. But this was one of those books that honestly, Glenda, I didn't want to put down because he merged business, he merged spirituality, he merged goodness, he merged himself into this book. And while I've never met him, I've never spoke to him, there's almost a connection to him spiritually that this is the type of person I would want to work with, hang with, talk to, do business with. And so I was absolutely, it was a book. I'm like, my gosh, why doesn't everyone write like this or do this in the business world? You know, I came from the business world. I didn't much care for the business world. I re-like the business world because of David Meltzer.
Well, I've been following David for now a couple of years, and I started finding David on Clubhouse. And he does a morning stint, and I can't remember which day he's on. Because I listen to Clubhouse in the mornings as I'm getting ready, because there is so much information there. And I believe he's on Thursdays, but I could be wrong. And when I know when David, it's usually by the end of the week that he's talking, I listen, because everything that comes out of David's mouth is wisdom. I love him. There's so much of him that I really connect with. First of all, it's his way he talks. And he also reminds me of my dad. He's got such a huge smile on his face, and that was my dad. And it's the way he talks and the way he talks about people and business and being honorable. That's the way I believe in, and that's what I have always tried to teach my children. And so I want to go through some of this book because I want to really encourage others to read it. And, you know, here's the thing, and we're going to talk about this and say this throughout the time for as people jump on and off and watch us. But this Connected to Goodness is a phenomenal book. And I recommend this to anybody and everybody. And why do I recommend this? Because it's just part of learnings of everyday life. It's not just about business. Although David is a lawyer, he's been in through sports. He's a philanthropist. He just is. There's a word for him, and I will say it to him. And he's a mensch. A mensch is a Yiddish word for meaning he's a person, which means it's not just a person. It's a person who lives on the higher level of things, being kind, considerate. His attributes ring hard in my heart, and I love it. And I believe that this book is worth reading to everybody. And as I've read through it, I've not read through it once, but I've read through it a couple of times, and I've gone through and highlighted it again for myself so that we can speak on it. But here's the thing, I want to also offer this. I have some signed autograph copies from David, and I'm giving those away. So whoever ends up watching this and wants the copy of an autograph book from David, no cost. All you need to do is just, put it into the chat or put it into the thing that, connected to goodness. That's all we need. And I just want for others to be watching and learning, because what he talks about is everybody should know.
Absolutely. And, with everything that's in this book, you know that he's not an imposter. You can't fake all of this. You can't fake the quotes. You can't fake what he talks about, how he talks about, how he connects everything. Like I said, I thought it was just going to be another business book, but it's really, it's something for everyone to absorb and understand and put into action.
And it's an easy read.
It is. It's, you don't have to, it's for me, it's something, because I love things like this so much, the spiritual aspect of things. It's more about like rereading it and letting it imprint on you. It's like that's something everybody needs to think about, talk about, and take action to be like.
So when he talks about connecting to goodness, he talks about, the principles, and he breaks it down. And like I said, it's probably one of the easiest reads I've ever had. And I love it because he's very much on the same grounds of, and I'm not sure if you've read it or not, but I've been a student of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich for a number of years now. And, but Napoleon Hill's book is a very hard read. And you do have to read it, and you have to break it up into so many different sorts. But David is on the same grounds of Napoleon Hill, but he does it on such easy reads, and they're my beliefs, because way he talks about things, they're how I have actually made things in my life come to reality because of certain things. So let's go through a bit of how he talks in this book. And what I just want to really encourage others to do is please, please, please. Oh, we're going to, yay. So, Claudine, if you want to just send me a DM, and I will be delighted to send you a copy of his book. And we haven't even begun yet, but yes, I love to share. This is my, like the whole idea of David is to share, because that's what he is all about, to help others, to share for others. Just when I reached out to him and asked him if he would come on, he didn't hesitate. He would be more than happy. And I love people that, just what he talks about is he doesn't put himself on any pedestal. He's just like you and me and you. And there's nothing different or, and that's the whole thing of life of nobody needs to be on a pedestal. We just need to just be.
Exactly. And that was always one of the things that when I was in my other world, I call it, real estate and lending, construction, doing that, there was so much arrogance. And it just used to baffle me. Because one, to sell real estate, you need a license, you pass a test. So anybody that takes the time can get a license. And I thought, why are these people acting like this? The arrogance was unbelievable. So here's a man who, is involved in, like you said, sports, an attorney, investing. And I read this and I'm like, that would be some guy I could just sit around and chat with. not feel any different than him, because basically we're not. We're all the same.
We are.
Just it may be at different points in our lives, but deep inside we're a body, we have a soul, and when you read David's book, you'll understand what we're talking about.
So, well, first of all, so thanks, Lisa. Lisa's joining in today and she loves us and we're glad. So, please share us as well with others so that, we can get out more to people. And we're here because we're trying to help everybody else grow at the same time. And we're learning and growing as we move through our life. Life is all about learning. So let's talk about learning. And, as we talk about in the Connected to Goodness, David talks about principles of life. And it's so true about, about the principles of life. Thanks, Lisa. So the principles of life are the key elements. And so we all have to realize that, when we're building a house, when you're building your life, it all starts with foundations. Because you know what? If we build a house and it didn't have a foundation, your house is going to stand for any length of time. It's going to fall. And it's just like that with any part in our life. We have to look at building ourselves. And through that, we look at the ways that we can demonstrate these keys. So, he talks about, how dealing through the obstacles of life. And one of the analogies he's put is that if you were given along your path that you were to have a wall that impeded your path and stopped you from going forward, would you attempt to climb over it, burrow underneath it, walk around it, or try to blow it up? It's finding the solutions that make it easiest. And through all of these is finding your ways of getting through your obstacles. And the easiest way of getting through these different obstacles, and he talks about it as well as getting out of your own way, which is something that I've been always one to been doing that to my own self. So yes, of course, I'm going to look at something like that because that rings true to me. And I'm just being real, of ways of I've held myself back in life. And I think we all have done things like that throughout our life. Have you not, Nicole?
That rings so true with me for so many years, especially as I tried to reinvent myself. And I took so long to look at myself, assess who I am, what I am, almost too long. But it's so interesting because we are our own worst enemy at times. We really are. People around me would be like, well, why don't you do that? Gosh, you do this so well, or you do that. And I don't know. What'll people say? Why did I care what people said? Because once I found my self-confidence again, I'm like, there's always doubters, there's always haters. Just be you and you can't go wrong. That's what I came up with. And that's what I'm finally doing, Glenda. So yes, I was impeding my progress at every turn.
And you said something very interesting and very important that we all need to realize. You know what? At any time in our lives, we do fall short on ourselves. And what it's sometimes like, through my life, people would look at me just because of my height and would say to me, oh, like she's confident, she's got it all, but they didn't know what was going on inside of me. And there were so many times, especially times throughout when I was going through major obstacles or, things happened. Well, I at those points thought that they happened to me, not for me. And at those points, those cratered my confidence level. And that caused me to have a lot of stress and a lot of low self-worth at that point. And it wasn't until I realized after some of those things where I fell and yet another mistake, but it's when I realized that actually these things are actually happening for me and not to me.
Exactly. And one of the things that was so important for me was to look at everything and ask, what did I learn? What did I learn from this? What could I have done different? What
Yeah.
will I do different? And I always tell people there is no failure. There's only feedback. Feedback on how to do it different the next time and do it more maybe to where it complements your soul other than someone's opinion.
So David talks about that as well in the book, and he says the exact same thing. So he has his overview. He says of the strategy are the 3 A's that he talks about. And I love this: alignment, action, and adjustment. So, you know what, we need to figure out, we need to align ourselves. So being real about who we are, right? About being more interested in things than interesting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's
And
huge.
that's very huge. And that one really resonates with my soul because I had some people trying to like push me to be a coach. Oh, well, you've been through divorce. You need to coach. You need to coach. And I'm like, okay, I can coach. I've coached. It didn't feed my soul. It didn't feel right for me.
Yep.
It's right for you. You
Yep.
love it. But for me, I'm like, no, that's not who I am. That's not what I want to do. And I knew intrinsically I'm a healer. I just knew it. So I had to, again, get out of my way, stop listening to others, and go inside myself and find that answer. So I had to align with what suited me.
That's the whole idea of aligning and feeling what it is. And David's very much a feeler of things. So what he says, that it's better to understand everything by the simple process of listening, concentrating, and being aware. Have you ever been into conversations? No, I'm going to adjust this because a thought just came into my mind.
I saw it. I saw your eyes light up. I'm like, oh, something happened here.
I read somewhere about another time, when an Indian chief is sitting around a circle amongst his people, did you know that the Indian chief is the very last person, like they're sitting around having their meeting? The Indian chief is the very last person to speak ever. What happens is, and it just shows you the wisdom there, that when he's going around his circle, whatever the subject matter is, he starts by listening to all of his people. Once he has listened to all of his people by what his people have to say, he stops, he thinks, he's listened, and then he comments and gives whatever he wants to put in. He doesn't interject. He becomes interested, just like he's saying. He's listening. He's concentrating on the information that's being given. And then he's aware of what it is before he speaks out his piece.
Wow. And that's so powerful, Glenda, is he listens to hear, not to formulate a story, not to interject, not to change someone's path, but really listening to hear.
How many people really sit down and listen to what somebody says? Most people, when they're talking, are so ready to give their comments, their opinions, even to people at a much higher level. And you never know who the messenger is. Let me put that number one, because I'm a believer of, I've learned so much from children. I have listened so much from, thank you, Donna. Thank you for joining us today as well. I've listened from so much information from all different levels and all different sources. Doesn't matter what I've been through, but what matters is being able to, button this, right? 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Exactly.
And listen to what's coming out. And instead of jumping into something, also sitting back for a moment and digesting that before you speak.
And you know, that's a skill, Glenda. That is a learned skill. And I've learned to do that. And the reason I did is because I was on Clubhouse so much. And when you're a moderator, you have to listen to people and then speak. And it dawned on me, it's like, had I been doing this my whole life, I would know so much more than not that I know that much, but I thought, what a gift this platform has been for me, because it taught me to listen to others, what they're saying. And then when you listen, or you can hear the tone in their voice, you can gauge maybe what is needed or how to respond based on what they're saying and how they're saying it.
And the other part of it all is maybe you will look at things maybe just a little bit different, because that gives you time, just as he says, alignment, action, and adjustment. That might give you time to adjust, or maybe even give you that aha moment where you all of a sudden go, holy geez. Having that time of those 3A strategies is, I look at it as nothing but beautiful. So he also talks about feeling that disconnection that we have. So let's talk about the disconnection. Do you ever have those negative connections, those negative words that go in your head? Those thoughts, that chatter that stop you from doing something, or maybe you're perceiving something that isn't even true. Have you ever had any of this?
You know, that is so common. We make up so many stories in our mind, whether someone passes us in a car, maybe speeding, we make up what they're doing. Someone that cuts in front of us in line, we make up something. We are constantly making up our own stories, never knowing the true story or never bothering to ask. Why do we do that? You know, we have to start controlling the mind and, stop that chatter. We're constantly chattering, and 99% of it is not real.
So he says, I have my own ways, but he says, and I've known this from, our mentor, Forbes, as I'll say, he will say to himself, cancel, to, stop the thing. I have my ways, and I have coached it. I will say, stop, because when I have that little voice going off in my head and talking and telling me what I can't do, because it's never telling me, yeah, you go, girl, you got it. And it doesn't usually say that. It usually says, are you kidding? What are you trying to tell yourself? Right? And that's when I say to myself, either verbally, I'll say, stop it. So it breaks that. It's like, okay, I know, no, I need to stop that conversation in my head. But he uses the word cancel. So either way, it's to stop your head, that noise from going in. And when we tell ourselves that, we actually turn that conversation from where we are, because we do it to ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
Who else is going to be telling you what else you can't do? Well, there are lots. And that's the whole idea of all of these things, is by learning to trust yourself that little. So sometimes we feel out of sorts with ourselves, and we have that energy. And maybe when we're feeling out of sorts, it's time that we reconnect and start asking ourselves some other questions. And those questions we need to start delving deep in. And as he talks about in his first thing, is the first principle, foundation. And we talked this about just a moment ago, and I didn't, hold on, I'm going to have to mute myself for a second because I didn't close my door. And okay, now it's gone by. There's an ambulance coming. They're coming.
As long as it's not for you.
No, 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 no. No, they're just coming to get me because they just want to be part of it all. That's all good. So, foundation, principle number one, it's foundation. So, foundation is he who has not first laid his foundation may be able to great ability to lay them afterwards, but they will lay with trouble to the architect and danger to the building. That was a quote that he gives, and it's what I said at the beginning: is when you're building anything in our lives, when we're building, you can think of building a friendship. If we don't start even a friendship on being, certain foundations, and we're going to talk about the foundations that I am a very big advocate is values. But the first thing before we can build our foundation is we need to build our own foundation within ourselves, right? And sometimes our foundation sometimes changes, our own values change because sometimes it's what happens in our own lives, right? If you've gone through something and find out that you maybe have changed, you don't sort of look at things the same way.
Yeah, Glenda, as I reflect back to maybe 20, 25 years ago, I'm not even the same person. My foundation, I had to rebuild my foundation. And I knew that it had to be stronger and more resilient than my last foundation. So you have to look at things like that, and that's where you go inside of yourself. But my old foundation crumbled because there was no strength in it.
Well, you also, when you see things, or maybe, you get involved in things because, I had this, as David talks about in his book as well, as being a people pleaser. You try to do things because even though some things inside of you maybe, if I could talk to my 20-year-old self again, and or even earlier, being so wanting to please my boss or please my family, doing all these things, but some of the things didn't feel right to me. And when we do things that don't feel right to us, we're actually hurting our own selves because it's not on our value trait. It's not on our foundation of who we are. And part of that is learning to find out and start looking at yourself. So, I highly recommend that you make a list of all your values, of things that mean something to you, of what are the things that you believe in, what are the things, because what you believe in your own values comes across your life as whether in business. For me, it came across huge in my parenting with my kids, because I wanted to be true to myself and true to my kids. Like, it was at one point I really looked back at myself and felt that I was lying to myself and lying to my children. And that made me make different decisions in my life because of that. So, what are some of your values that are important to you?
Truth. That is my biggest one, is you've got to be truthful to me. If I catch you in a lie, we can't be friends. We really can't. I was married to someone who lied about things that didn't even make sense, Glenda. I would hear him. I'm like, well, that didn't happen. 30-year relationship. I'm like, what is he talking about? And then I caught him in bigger lies and bigger lies and bigger lies, and then lie upon lie. And even my kids tell me, they'll come out, well, Mom, do you like this? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, you're the worst liar ever. You just tell me the truth. My daughter says, you suck at lying, Mom. And I do. There's something in my core. I cannot lie, and I cannot be lied to. And that for me is the number one deal breaker in any kind of relationship, is if you lie to me.
Yeah. So yeah, we're talking about people pleasing, and see, it's not it's like this is something we all have done in our lives, and it's really important that we learn that these type of things, traits, that it's because we're unsure of ourselves that we have to be. And I've done it. We've all done it. It's
Yeah.
not that, I can't say, I'm just being real. I have done these things in my own life that really sickened me to some of the things, and it happened not once or twice. It's happened time and time again throughout. I think that's the greatest thing about getting older is you get to a point in your life, hopefully, but I know I've reached it, where I don't need somebody to like me anymore.
And you know what? That's what I was just going to say, Glenda, as I reflect back on when I wanted to make everybody happy or keep everybody, in a good spirits. I wanted them to be happy because I wasn't happy inside. And I really, as I reflect on that, I didn't like myself at the time. I didn't know who I was, what I wanted, and I felt very small. I felt very small inside. And that it does take a lot of work, a lot of reflection, but when I wanted to please others, it was because I wasn't pleasing myself.
Yeah. So it comes into being integrity. Having that integrity of being who you are, to understand that you realize that, first of all, I had the other day, my friend and I sat down and we had coffee together, and we had these conversations. And the one thing when we left was that we loved more than anything is we didn't have to agree on things. We were both truly honest with things. And she didn't need to agree with my points, and I didn't need to agree with her points. We could respect each other's for our own personal opinions. And that's really what, to me, part of my value system is. I'm the same way as you are. Of it doesn't matter. Like, life is about being real. You know what? I won't. If my kids ask me something, and if I don't like it, I will be honest. I don't like something, or I don't answer.
Yeah. And I do that too. And it's like, I've got a 20-year-old and a 28-year-old. And I go back to when I was that age and I thought I was smarter than everyone and knew more than everyone. And they're kind of there right now. And so for me, it's like, well, I didn't know those things until I grew up, and I'm still growing up. Just to clarify, I will never stop learning. I will never stop, reaching out for knowledge, but I'm not going to argue with anyone because they're right for them and I'm right for me. And that's okay.
And that's okay. And you know what? Yes, being our younger self, and you know what? I think that having the respect to listen, and you know what? You don't need to always give your 2 cents worth. And sometimes it's better, I always believe, to not say anything than to say something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes there's a lot to be said and just being silent. Silence can be very effective at times.
So yes, yes, yes. And and Donna's reached her own of the points of being able to, I'm sure what she was saying to, being at this point in life where you're happy within who yourself, and knowing who you are. And that comes with a lot of knockdowns. It's not because, you know that you've done it all, or that you've done the things. I think the biggest knockdowns in our lives teach us so much, and they're the greatest teachers that we could really have, right?
Yeah, they're tough on us. They're tough teachers. But when you have that lesson, you don't forget it. You don't forget it. It always remains with you. And for me, I'm very glad because I don't want to keep repeating mistakes. I want to learn and I want to do something. And even if I do it different, it might not be perfect, but at least I learned from the last one to try something else.
Well, again, his 3 A's: align, take action, and adjust accordingly.
Adjust.
And that's how we get to this to manifestation. So, you know what? There's a lot of people that believe that manifesting things is a woo-woo type of thing. And so let's talk about manifesting for a moment, because David is a very firm believer about manifesting. And you know, when we look at trying to change things in our life, and whether it may be that we have something that we're looking to obtain in our life, whether it be um, a, a piece of material thing, whether we're looking to get somewhere in our lives, whatever it is, these are all ways of manifesting things. And we need to kind of, that's part of where he talks about aligning ourselves. Because, you know, when things don't feel right, you know, the old story as well, if when things are too good to be true, they usually are.
Absolutely.
So when something doesn't feel right in ourselves, we have to really step back and acknowledge what doesn't feel right. You know, are the hairs on your arms standing up, whether it's excitement because you're happy because maybe you are on course, or is the pit of your stomach rumbling around because maybe you're saying something that isn't right? And I know that happened to me several times in my life, and that caused me to actually to go and delve and look into something very deep in my life. And I made a major change in my life because of that, because I finally listened. It's that voice in us. Because how often does that voice yell to us, but it goes on to deaf ears?
We have a tendency to fight our truths, and I'm really not sure why, because I always tell my girls, you came here with everything inside of you that you're going to need for this journey. Just go inside and find it. But we're so conditioned to look outside of us for everything that we often forget the brilliance that lies inside of us.
And the one part thing that he says, and it's so true in so many different parts, is, you know, to obtain the confidence in yourself, what we need to have is the courage. And it's courage that is one of the most personal values that we need to have, because it's that courage that allows us the confidence to move forward, to step out of our comfort zone, to move forward when everybody else might be saying, "What are you thinking?" It's that courage that helps us to move forward. And when we don't have that courage, or that within ourselves, it stops us from living our life. It stops us from manifesting, because we're so worried what everybody else is saying, what everybody else is thinking, or what are they talking about behind our backs? Because that's what goes on, right? So we start with learning to go into clarity, balance, and focus that brings us into our confident selves. So, how do we get through to that point in our lives? Donna's telling us here. She's learned that it's easier to get into a situation than to get out of one. Yeah, you're right, Donna. It
Mhm.
certainly is so much easier to get in, because we jump at things so much, right? But so I ask you then, so why is it so hard for us to get out of it? I'm glad you look at this before, but let's look at this. Let's go into it a different way now. We get into situations. You know, it's just like arriving at somebody's house and you feeling to yourself, I don't want to be here. Have you ever had that?
Oh man, yeah. I say yes to something that you know you're going to hate. It's like, why did I do that? Why did I do that? And sometimes you go right back to people pleaser. That old person shows up back in your subconscious that many years ago wanted to please everybody, and you said yes when you wanted to say no.
And we got to learn that no, first of all, there, you know, no is first of all a full sentence. I have a dear friend that will never say no, that it comes with a story. And I say to her many times, out of respect, I don't need to hear the story. No means no, because I'm trying to teach her something, that we don't need to tell stories, because that's part of the people pleasing, right? We start to try to people please. So what do we have here? Donna says, now she'll make up excuses to leave. Great. And as you should. Or sometimes what I will do when I don't really, well, first of all, if I really don't want to go someplace, I got the balls now to say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not coming.
Yeah.
Because
And like you said, no, period, end of sentence.
instead of, but sometimes if one of those situations where you sort of feel you have to be there kind of things, then what I will say is I can only be there for a certain amount of time. I only have, a certain amount of time. I don't need to give more excuses, but I go where do I want to go, and I don't go where I don't want to go. So Claudine says she's always on the defensive side, so I react quickly is one reason. Well, and we got to learn that we don't need to always react to everything, right? We got to trust ourselves. And why do we need to always have to give reasons for things? If you got to do what feels good within yourself. And if it's not on your priority, like how many times do you start to do something at work and maybe somebody will ask you to read something that's theirs and it has nothing to do with you? I know as a coach, I have many people that will send me messages and ask me for coaching on the side, and they're not in my thing, but they'll ask me my opinion on things. And sometimes jumping in and helping someone else, I don't mind. But then it comes to the part where there's right. It when you say yes at one point, sometimes it continuously goes, and then it takes you off your stream. You're driving on a path and all of a sudden you're on another road now. And it's really hard to continue your focusing on what you're trying to get done for yourself, for your clients, for whatever it is. So learning to be able to have boundaries about things, and learning that, like we were just saying, finding out what works for you.
And Glenda, as I see these comments and look at them, I resonate with every single one of them. And I think a lot of it has to do with our conditioning. When we were younger, we had to be polite. We had to accommodate. We had to be nice. And I had my kids when I was older, after I'd been around for a while or been through, the workforce and around men and around, bosses that were cranky and ugly and demanding. And I came to the realization that I don't want my daughters to have to please those people if it doesn't please themselves. And one of the things I told them is I said, I know everyone says respect your elders and always be nice, but I said, respect is earned. I said, and if someone is not kind to you or dismisses you or is rude, ugly, or angry, you have every right to walk away without a word.
And that's huge, what you just said, to walk away without a word. Like, we don't need to verbally abuse people.
Right.
There's kind ways of just, silence is golden, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something doesn't feel right, instead of saying things, because sometimes you got to feel it, and you can feel if you say something. You don't need to get into a banter. You don't need to get into arguments or that. You can just say thank you,
or just turn and walk away. I'm not working from ego anymore. I don't need to get in the last word anymore. I'm going to save myself the headache and just walk, and I'm not even looking back.
I love it. And it's so true. And as I said, this comes with age. And I know it's very funny when you said to me about respect is earned. My son used to say as a child, because certain people in his life sort of felt that they deserve respect because of who they were. And he used to say to me, I don't want to respect somebody who doesn't respect me. And I would just sit there like, out of the mouths of babes. Yeah,
Yes.
you know,
So true.
so true. And it's true. Respect is not something that you automatically get because you're older. Respect is of how you give out. And it's true. This is what we learned. You know, so many things in our world we learned as a child, and we sort of felt that we had to carry this through our lives. But it didn't serve us or anyone else by doing these things, did it?
It did not. It did not. And I have learned my lessons. And while I choose not to be rude, I also choose to walk away with my dignity intact and my mouth shut.
Or otherwise, you know, just as David puts in here, resentment follows.
Exactly.
And I lived a lot of part of my life, especially through relationships, where I had resentment. And that's not something that anybody needs to have in themselves and in their lives, because then you're not living your true self by being resented. He also mentions in this, as you know, we have to let go of our egos, which is so true. We talked about this just a short few minutes ago, about having egos, and that, you know, nobody is up on that platform. I always believed, and I remember the first time I really thought about this was Dr. John DeMartini. I don't know if you know him. He's quite a philosopher, and he's a brilliant man who he's also a coach, and I have followed him through the years as well. And he always talked about that when we put people up on pedestals, what ends up happening is we don't have a really proper, honest relationship, because when we look up to people, then we're looking down upon ourselves. And the opposite is true, and that actually hurts who we are. And what we can learn from that is it's just like, nobody's better than me, and I'm not better than anyone else, but I can learn from someone because maybe they've been through a different path in life that they can teach me something from, and which that I'm honored, but I'm not putting them on a pedestal. And I don't believe in any sort of way that no matter what I have been in, or no matter what I have, that I'm not better than anyone else. I might have had some maybe other blessings in my life that somebody else hasn't had in their life, or vice versa. And for when I see somebody having something that I don't have and I'm interested in, then my question would turn around to be to them, and asking them questions on how they obtained it, because maybe they can teach me something.
Yeah, and you know, Glenda, I remember as we're talking about ego, my ex-husband was very egotistical. And I said, you know what, why? He says, well, how can I measure my success unless I compare myself to other people? And I said, what about the way you feel inside? He says, oh no, that, you know, this person has cars, this one has a boat. Why don't I have this? And it baffled me. It baffled me. And I knew at that point that was a very empty soul, a very empty vessel, that he felt an ego was the gauge of success, something that's not even real, something that's fake. And I remember that to this day. And I still think, you know, that was so sad to compare yourself like that.
Very sad. Very true. The next key element that he talks about is experience, our value, that are so valuable to our life. And it's so true, because so many times, and we talk about this through when we, with Nicole and I, talk about reinvention and building yourself up even after the age of 50, because life you should be enjoying life no matter what age, and not stopping to live your life because you feel that you're too old to be moving forward. But the reinvention of life also is so important, of the values that you go through, of the experiences. So, from the fails, they're not fails, because if we don't fall, how are we going to learn? If we don't fall, how do we get back up again? If we keep going, we're not going to learn something from it. So instead of knocking yourself down by, I don't want to talk about what I didn't do, or my business didn't work as good. I can't tell you how many business people have had so many failures before they ever had successes.
Absolutely.
Right? It's so important. I think one of the biggest failures I had is when I went and I bought a house, and I did 2 houses at one time. Big mistake. Okay. But, I got caught up on all the things that I thought I could do. And I believed somebody. And the biggest failure I had, and I had to eat a lot of humble pie, and it was more to others than it was really to myself. But the biggest failure was because it cost me a lot of money. You see, I had a person who I thought was going to be a partner and do construction on my property. And it turned out that they took a lot of shortcuts. And when I had this nagging suspicion that something was wrong, I actually went in and I opened up walls that were already closed off, because something told me I had to look. Don't know why, but something told me something was wrong. And when I went in and opened up, I found huge things that were wrong. And I had to go back and I had to redo everything that was done. So I had to spend double the money. Huge mistake. But let me tell you something, probably one of the greatest learning experiences of my life. And what I was able to capture all of the things that I had lost from it, from how I could move it forward and through the selling of it. But when this is part of what I say of learnings through our reinventions of ourselves. And this came, like I bought these properties when I did it. It was after 50. That was part of my reinvention of Glenda. Thanks, Donna. So Donna's going to be moving into a new phase or a new place in May. Well, congratulations.
Wonderful.
And good for you. This is an extremely exciting time in life, and good for you. I want to congratulate you, first of all, for having the courage, which we just talked about, to make this jump, and now to do this at this time in life.
Absolutely.
You deserve that. That's huge. And good for you, because you know what? That takes, courage.
Courage. Mm-hmm.
Courage, right?
Phoenix, Arizona. Donna, are you from Phoenix? I just moved here from Arizona. I'm in South Carolina, but I moved a couple months ago. So when I see Phoenix, it's like, oh, I should be sitting out drinking tea on the patio in Arizona.
Well, that's the most important thing. It's all the things that you should do. And instead of thinking I should be doing this, she's got the courage to get up and do it. That's part. No, she says that she lives in Ohio now.
Okay.
Well, that's a big jump for you. And that's
sometimes just when you make that decision, that's jumping over the fear. The decision can be the hardest part. And you sit there like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And then all of a sudden this fire in your belly and this resolve, and you make a decision, and you just know it's right. You know it's right.
So, this time has gone by just way too fast. And I want to comment again that anybody that would like, we didn't go through enough of this because you could go through this, and we are going to be having David Meltzer on our show on March the 15th, and we're going to come on and do another live, and we'll talk about more of David's book, because he has, like I said, so many golden things in this book. The nuggets that this man has to share with us, you will love and really be grateful that you've read it. So, as I said, I have a few of David's book of Connected to Goodness, and I'm trying to show it. Yes, and with this book, Connected to Goodness, I actually have signed copies from David himself, and anybody that would like a free copy of this book, comment in the chat and let me know if you want a copy. It's definitely worth the read. He talks on so many levels. He is, like I said, he's a lawyer. He's a businessman. He's been in sports. He is, I know he's a multimillionaire, could be even more than that. I'm not sure, but the man has done wonders in his life, and the kindness that he has in his heart, because all he ever asks is, what can I do for you? And I love that analogy in life of always looking to give. Now, here we'll start with one little thing before we end up finishing off. And of course, Nicole, I have to hear from you. But remember, life isn't always just giving. It's not just about giving, it's also receiving. So remember, we always have to work on that situation that goes around in circles. For me to give, I have to receive. And it doesn't always come from the same person. But remember, that's how the universe works. So it's not always about the giving, but the receiving as well to keep us going. Nicole, what golden nugget do you have for us as well today before we end off?
Well, you know what I've been thinking about as I've seen these comments today, and we're talking about fear and fear holding us back. And I think back to my mother, who passed away in 2015. And she was incredibly talented. She could sing, she could dance, she could draw, she could cook, she could sew, she could do anything, but she chose to do nothing. And she could have been so much more than she was, but as we knew she was going to pass away. She goes, I was always scared of everything. She goes, I've been scared since I was a little girl. She goes, I remember hearing years ago in California that there was going to be a flood. She goes, and I sat on a couch all day with a life jacket on. She goes, everything scared me.
Oh my God.
I know. And
so, it's sad. It's very sad.
It is. A little girl sitting there waiting for a flood. How fearful that must have been. And when she passed away, I remember thinking, I don't want that to be me. I do not want that to be me. I don't want to live my life in fear of what is coming. I want to step over that fear and see where I'm going. So the things I'm doing now, Glenda, and that includes talking here today, that includes writing a book, books. There's so many things I've done that I never thought I could or would do, because I've taken that one step over fear. And when you do that, I think you become limitless. You realize that so many things open up to you. It's like, well, I did that. That really wasn't that bad. Well, I can do this. And so what I tell, don't be afraid. It might not work out, but there's your feedback. Take that step over that courage and into the new life. You can reinvent yourself at any age. You and I have both done it, and here we are.
So, on top of fear, the meaning of fear is false evidence appearing real. Fear is what we perceive something to be, that something's going to be negative, that it's not going to work, that we're going to feel a certain way. It's not happened yet.
Yeah.
So step out. You know what? Learn from people that have done what you're looking to do. Helping others there, and ask. That's the other thing. You know what? Don't be afraid to ask others for help. You never know, they might say yes. Thanks for joining us today on another wonderful day of Let's Get Real. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. Remember, love us, share us. And if you are looking to read a really great book and want to get some real different philosophies and a mindset, read Connected to Goodness by David Meltzer. He is wonderful and easy read. And as I said, I've got some free copies that have already been signed by David that I'm willing to send to you. No cost. All you got to do is take action. Thanks, everybody.